Every long-running system leaves fingerprints. Not loud ones. Quiet ones, embedded in routine, repetition, and selective memory. On the surface, Sister Wives showed a family navigating love, faith, and complexity under pressure. But beneath the confessionals and carefully framed explanations, a different structure was taking shape, one where access became currency, obedience became safety, and accountability slowly disappeared. This isn't about one argument or one wife leaving. This is about a pattern, where one household consistently benefited, while others absorbed the emotional cost. Where transparency protected authority instead of exposing it. And where control wasn't enforced through force, but through revision. Tonight, we're not revisiting drama. We're auditing a system, episode by episode, statement by statement, to show how memory became power, how visibility became leverage, and how an entire family paid the long-term price. If you're here to understand how this really worked, stay with us. What we're about to show is documented, time-stamped, and impossible to unsee. Section 1. The Promise of Transparency. When Sister Wives premiered in 2010, it positioned itself as an unprecedented social experiment. The Brown family presented their lives as open books. Polygamy framed not as secrecy, but as structure. Kody Brown repeatedly emphasized transparency. In early episodes, he stated, "We're not hiding. We're showing America who we really are." Legally, this mattered. At the time, Utah's anti-bigamy statutes, specifically Utah Code Section 767-101, criminalized plural cohabitation. The family's decision to film was, in part, a strategic assertion of openness. By 2013, those laws would be challenged in Brown v. Buman, where a federal judge ruled portions of the statute unconstitutional as applied to consenting adults. The Browns weren't just a family on television. They were a case study in visibility. And that visibility created a new dynamic. One where viewers became long-term witnesses. But what happens when the witnesses notice patterns the subject doesn't think matter? Section 2. Kody is the center. For much of the series, Kody Brown functioned as the narrative axis. Confessional segments centered on his interpretations. Family meetings revolved around his decisions. Conflict resolution often began, and ended, with his perspective. This wasn't accidental. In polygamist family structures, the husband often serves as both emotional and logistical authority. Sociologists studying fundamentalist Mormon offshoots have documented this consistently. What viewers didn't question at first was Kody's self-confidence. He was animated, expressive, conviction-driven. But over time, fans began noticing something subtle. Kody's version of events was constantly shifting. Not across years, but sometimes across episodes filmed weeks apart. Was it memory, or was it narrative control? Section 3. The First Cracks. The earliest visible fracture appears during Christine Brown's pregnancy with Truly in Season 1. While Christine was in labor, Kody was courting Robin Sullivan. Viewers at the time accepted Kody's explanation. He was spread thin, managing multiple responsibilities. But years later, fans revisited those episodes. They noticed the body language. Kody's urgency with Robin. His calm detachment when Christine was in distress. Christine would later state on camera, "I felt like I wasn't a priority." At the time, this was framed as emotional insecurity. In hindsight, Fans began asking a harder question. Was this the moment the hierarchy quietly changed? If priority shifts once, does it ever truly reset? Section 4. The pattern emerges. As seasons progressed, a pattern solidified. Kody's physical presence increased in one household, and decreased in others. This wasn't speculation. Fans began timestamping episodes. Reddit threads compiled data. Which nights Kody stayed where? Who he defended in conflicts? Whose emotions he validated, and whose he minimized. One Reddit user wrote, "It's not what he says. It's where he goes when things get hard." Kody consistently framed himself as overwhelmed. Yet viewers noticed something telling. He was never overwhelmed in Robyn's house. Why does stress disappear in one environment and intensify in others? Section 5. Gaslighting or self-belief. In later seasons, Kody increasingly accused his wives of rewriting history. He used the phrase repeatedly. From a psychological standpoint, this is significant. Gaslighting is defined as persistent denial of observable reality, leading others to question their perceptions. However, intent matters. Some experts suggest Kody may genuinely believe his own revisions. Clinical psychologist Dr. Ramani Durvasula has noted, people with high ego investment often confuse narrative consistency with truth. In other words, if the story protects the self, it feels accurate. Fans noticed Kody often reacted with anger when confronted with footage contradicting him. Not confusion. Not reflection. Anger. Why does evidence feel like an attack? Section 6. COVID and control. The COVID-19 pandemic became the ultimate stress test. Kody implemented strict rules. No social gatherings. No travel. No inter-household contact without compliance. He justified these rules as protection. Yet fans noticed inconsistencies. Robyn's household maintained near constant access to Kody. Other wives were effectively isolated. Janelle would later say, "It felt less about safety and more about obedience." Legal scholars note that power structures often consolidate during crises. This wasn't just about health. It was about authority. When rules apply unevenly, what are they really enforcing? Section 7. The moment fans caught it. The turning point wasn't a fight. It was a tell-all. As host Suki Krishnan calmly asked Kody to reconcile his statements with past footage, viewers saw something different. Kody didn't answer the question. He attacked the premise. Fans noticed deflection instead of clarification, reframing instead of reflection, emotional escalation instead of explanation. YouTube comments exploded. One viewer wrote, "He's not confused. He's exposed." This was the moment fans realized. Kody wasn't unaware. He simply didn't think anyone was keeping receipts. What changes when the audience remembers better than the subject? Section 8. Community reaction. Across platforms, discourse shifted. Facebook groups analyzed old episodes. Reddit timelines mapped behavioral changes. TikTok creators stitched contradictions together. This wasn't hate watching. It was forensic viewing. Fans weren't reacting emotionally anymore. They were documenting patterns. And once patterns are documented, intent becomes harder to deny. At what point does observation become accountability? Section 9. Long-term consequences. Christine left. Janelle emotionally disengaged. Meri remained legally divorced and socially isolated. Kody was left with what fans now call the outcome he curated. In leadership theory, This is known as attrition through misalignment. When trust erodes, structure collapses. Kody often claimed he wanted unity. But unity requires consistency. And consistency requires self-awareness. Can a system survive when its architect refuses to audit himself? Psychologists who study leadership dynamics often note that memory is not a fixed archive. It is adaptive. And when authority is challenged, memory can become defensive. In long-running power structures, especially those built on hierarchy, leaders often internalize a version of events that protects their self-image. This is not always intentional deception. It is self-preservation. Clinical research on cognitive dissonance shows that when a person's actions conflict with their self-concept, the brain often resolves the tension by altering the narrative, rather than confronting the behavior. In simple terms, if the story makes me the hero, it feels true. This may explain why Kody Brown reacts not with confusion when contradicted, but with visible frustration. Evidence does not feel like information. It feels like an accusation. Experts refer to this pattern as self-justifying recall, a process where past decisions are reframed to align with present identity. Over time, this creates a closed loop. The more the narrative is challenged, the more rigid it becomes. For viewers, this rigidity became noticeable not in what Kody said, but in how unwilling he was to examine it. When memory stops being reflective, can accountability survive? Plural marriage systems have historically relied on privacy to function. Separation of households, internal dispute resolution, limited outside scrutiny. Sister wives disrupted that model. Legal scholars observing Brown v. Buman noted that while the ruling reduced criminal risk, it did not address the social dynamics of plural families under constant observation. Transparency, while legally protective, proved emotionally destabilizing. Every inconsistency was archived. Every contradiction replayed. Authority could no longer rely on selective memory. Cultural researchers have pointed out that modern audiences do not passively consume reality television. They analyze it. In this environment, leadership is no longer about control. It is about coherence. And coherence is difficult to maintain when lived experience contradicts stated values. What happens when visibility removes the ability to quietly revise history? Kody Brown. Kody's departure was not impulsive. It was cumulative. Over multiple seasons, viewers watched her articulate the same need repeatedly: emotional presence. When that need went unmet, her exit became not an act of rebellion, but resolution. Janelle Brown. Janelle's response was quieter, strategic. Rather than confrontation, she chose distance. Autonomy replaced negotiation. For many viewers, this signaled a shift from partnership to parallel lives. Meri Brown. Meri's position remained the most psychologically complex. Legally divorced, emotionally detached, yet still symbolically tied. Experts note that prolonged ambiguity often causes deeper emotional fatigue than direct loss. When structure dissolves, who pays the highest emotional cost? Across online platforms, fans began organizing information, not opinions. Episode timelines, quote comparisons, behavioral charts. This was not outrage. It was documentation. Longtime viewers referenced early seasons with precision, contrasting statements made years apart. The collective memory of the audience began to outperform the selective memory of the subject. And once that balance shifted, The narrative authority changed permanently. What happens when the audience remembers everything? If you believe long-running systems should be examined, not excused, make your position clear by liking this video. Add your observations or timestamps in the comments. Collective memory matters. Subscribe to stay inside this ongoing investigation, and continue with the next video in this playlist where we break down the evidence, chronologically, without spin.